There are moments in sports that scoreboards cannot record. They never appear in statistics columns or highlight reels set to thumping music. They do not end with trophies raised or championship belts fastened. Instead, they live in photographs that people keep returning to years later, unsure why their throat tightens each time. One such moment happened on the evening of May 10, 2026, inside Rome's historic Foro Italico during the BNP Paribas Open. And the two people at its center could not have seemed more mismatched at first glance. An 84-year-old president of Italy, Sergio Mattarella, who had shaken hands with kings, queens, and the most powerful figures on earth, and a 20-year-old Filipina tennis player named Alex Eala, who had just lost a match she desperately wanted to win. Before that evening, President Mattarella's handshake was a thing of diplomatic legend. Over decades of public service, the Italian head of state had greeted royalty from ancient European houses, prime ministers from every corner of the globe, sporting legends who had broken world records, and cultural icons whose faces adorned magazine covers. His public appearances were masterclasses in composed formality. Every gesture was measured. Every smile was timed. Every handshake lasted exactly as long as protocol demanded, no more, no less. That was the unspoken contract of his office. But contracts, it turns out, can be broken by something as simple as a young woman's courage. Alex Eala had just walked off the clay court after a third-round battle against Alina Rybakina, the world number 2 and a reigning Australian Open champion. The final score read 6-4, 6-3. On paper, it looked like a standard workmanlike victory for the favorite, but anyone who had actually watched the match knew that the scoreboard was a liar. Alex had played fearless, almost reckless tennis. She had broken Rybakina's serve when nobody expected her to. She had constructed stunning rallies that stretched across the baseline like miniature wars. She had forced the hardest-hitting woman in tennis into uncomfortable corners, making her scramble, making her think, making her earn every single point. For several stretches of the contest, the young Filipina matched the champion shot for shot, her backhand down the line finding angles that seemed to bend physics. In the end, the experience and raw power of Rybakina prevailed. Alex's ankle, which had been bothering her since the previous round, finally betrayed her at the worst possible moments. She lost. Her tournament run was over. She walked off the court with the quiet, composed dignity of someone who had learned to lose before she had learned to win, but her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone still processing the disappointment, still feeling the phantom ache of the victory that had slipped away. And then Sergio Mattarella stood up from his seat. The president had watched the entire match. Unlike some dignitaries who attend sporting events as a matter of obligation, nodding off between points, Mattarella had been fully present. His eyes had followed Alex's movements. He had seen her limp slightly between points. He had heard the Philippine flags waving in the stands, the chants of "Let's go, Alex," echoing through the historic marble arena with a passion that seemed almost out of place in reserved, elegant Rome. Something about that atmosphere had clearly moved him. When he walked toward Alex, his security detail immediately became alert. Cameras zoomed in. Producers in the broadcast truck leaned forward. This was not on the schedule. There was no formal presentation planned for a defeated player. But the 84-year-old head of state moved with clear purpose, his steps measured but not hesitant, as if he had decided something and was not going to let protocol stand in his way. Alex, still wearing her sweat-soaked match outfit, still catching her breath from 2 hours of war on clay, looked up in surprise. For a brief, suspended moment, the entire Foro Italico seemed to freeze. Even the buzzing semifinal crowd fell into a strange, expectant hush. Then Mattarella extended his right hand and Alex reached forward to take it. What happened next stunned everyone watching. Handshake did not last 1 second. It did not last 2 seconds. It stretched past 5, past 7, past 10 full seconds, an eternity in the silent, rigid world of political protocol. President Mattarella did not perform a quick grip and release, the kind of fleeting contact that says, "I have fulfilled my obligation and may now leave." Instead, he held her hand firmly and warmly, almost the way you would hold the hand of a family member who has just received difficult news. His fingers did not loosen, his palm did not pull away. For 10 seconds, the handshake became something else entirely, a conversation conducted through skin and sincerity. His eyes remained locked on hers. There was no glance toward the cameras, no quick smile for the photographers, just the steady, unblinking gaze of an old man who had seen enough of life to know when something genuine was happening in front of him. Alex, still processing the emotional loss of the match, suddenly found herself processing something entirely different. Then the president leaned slightly closer and quietly whispered something. The microphones inside the stadium, those sensitive instruments designed to capture every grunt, every ball strike, every chair umpire announcement, failed completely. They picked up only fragments, muffled syllables lost in the ambient noise of a crowd that had suddenly gone very quiet. Fans in the expensive seats leaned forward. The security detail shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. For a few extraordinary seconds, the only people who truly knew what was being said were the two people at the center of the moment. Later, eyewitnesses and professional lip readers would piece together the words. They would slow down the footage, zoom in, analyze the movement of lips and the tilt of heads. And when those words began circulating online, tennis fans around the world did not just feel emotional, they felt something closer to awe. "You may have lost the match," President Sergio Mattarella began softly, his voice too quiet for television but just loud enough for Alex to hear. "But you have not lost Rome." Those sitting close enough to catch the exchange immediately realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Alex Eala's eyes, which had been dry and composed throughout her post-match walk, suddenly began to glisten. The president continued speaking while gently holding her hand, his thumb moving slightly in a small, reassuring gesture. "The flags will return next year," he said. "The people will return and you will return." He paused for a moment, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze before adding words that would soon travel across continents and languages. "You have done something no trophy can measure. You have made Italy believe in something bigger than tennis. You have made Rome fall in love with the Philippines." Alex could not respond immediately. Her emotions overwhelmed her. She simply nodded softly, her chin trembling as she looked directly at the president, trying with everything she had to hold back tears in front of thousands of fans inside the Foro Italico. It was a losing battle. The tears came anyway, not falling but gathering in her lower eyelids like a confession she was not yet ready to make. Then Mattarella offered one final sentence spoken so quietly that even the lip readers had to argue about the exact phrasing. The consensus, however, was clear. "For that we are grateful," he said, "and for that you will always be welcome here." Slowly, almost reluctantly, the handshake came to an end. The president stepped back, his hand finally releasing hers while cameras captured every detail: Mattarella's warm, slightly sad smile, Alex's emotional, overwhelmed expression, the Philippine flags waving proudly throughout the crowd behind them. For a moment it seemed the scene was over. The president would return to his seat, Alex would walk off to the locker room, and the internet would have a brief, lovely moment before moving on to the next highlight. But the moment was still not over. In a gesture nobody expected, President Mattarella did not immediately turn back toward his official section. Instead, he pivoted slowly toward the stands where Filipino supporters had been waving their flags all evening, red, blue, white, and yellow dots scattered across the sea of Italian spectators. He raised his hand toward them in acknowledgement. It was not the formal, wrist-twisting wave of a politician fulfilling protocol. It was something simpler and rarer. He lifted his palm and held it there, almost like a blessing or a salute, his expression open and unguarded. It felt sincere, it felt emotional, it felt deeply human, as though the 84-year-old president had been genuinely moved by what he had witnessed on the court and in the crowd that evening. The arena erupted instantly. Italian fans who had been quietly respectful during the exchange began applauding their president with genuine warmth. Filipinos inside the stadium, many of whom had traveled across Europe, spending hard-earned savings on flights, train rides, hotels, and tickets, realized they had just experienced a moment far bigger than sports. Some of them were crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. Others held their flags higher, as if trying to touch something invisible in the air. For many watching around the world, the scene felt like a powerful symbol of respect, unity, and admiration between two nations connected through one young athlete. The handshake itself had lasted only a few seconds, but its emotional impact would last far longer. It became one of the defining images of Alex Eala's unforgettable rise on the world stage, not because of any trophy she won, but because of the grace she showed in defeat and the unexpected recognition she received from one of Europe's most respected leaders. The footage spread across the internet faster than any match highlight from the tournament itself. Within just a few hours, clips of President Sergio Mattarella's emotional handshake with Alex Eala had already been viewed tens of millions of times across social media platforms. Fans around the world replayed the moment again and again, each time finding something new. The way Mattarella's thumb moved slightly, the way Alex's lower lip trembled, the way the crowd seemed to hold its breath. The comment sections quickly turned into a massive global outpouring of emotion. Tennis fans, casual viewers, and even people who had never watched a full match before admitted they were deeply moved. "I've watched this 20 times and I still cry every single time," one viral comment read. Another wrote, "The president of Italy didn't care that she lost. He cared that she fought. That's what makes this moment so powerful." Thousands of viewers compared the gesture to something deeply personal rather than political. "He held her hand like a grandfather comforting family," one fan posted. "That wasn't diplomacy, that was genuine love and respect." Another comment, which gathered tens of thousands of likes, simply said, "In a world of fake gestures, this was real." In the Philippines, television networks replayed the footage repeatedly throughout the day. Several news programs interrupted their normal broadcasts just to discuss the emotional exchange, while commentators struggled to keep their composure describing what they had witnessed. One Filipino news anchor became visibly emotional on live television, her voice cracking as she said, "The president of the Italian Republic held Alex's hand and told her she made Rome believe. That was not just a handshake. It felt like a blessing." Italian media reacted with the same depth of emotion. Newspapers and sports outlets across the country placed the image of Mattarella and Eala at the center of their coverage. La Repubblica reportedly featured the photograph prominently on its front page with a headline describing it as the handshake that united two nations, while Corriere della Sera praised the gesture as something far beyond formal diplomacy, calling it personal, heartfelt, and unforgettable. Soon some of the biggest names in sports began reacting as well. Tennis stars shared screenshots of the moment across social media, many admitting they had rarely seen such a sincere interaction between a world leader and an athlete. Coco Gauff reportedly posted the image with the caption "Goosebumps." Naomi Osaka shared the clip while writing, "This is what real respect looks like." Even Roger Federer, who had already shown admiration for Alex Eala earlier in the tournament, was said to have privately praised the moment as one of the most beautiful scenes tennis had witnessed in years. What began as a simple post-match greeting had suddenly become something much larger. It was a symbol of grace in defeat, of respect beyond competition, and of the emotional power sports can have in bringing people together across nations and cultures. "A handshake can say more than any trophy," one commentator later said, and this one said everything. But perhaps the most emotional reactions came not from celebrities or politicians, but from ordinary fans who had witnessed the moment inside the stadium itself. Maria, a Filipina nurse living in Italy who had previously gone viral for holding a passionate sign during Alex's earlier matches, uploaded a tearful video shortly after the handshake spread online. Fighting back tears, she explained why the moment felt so personal to millions of Filipinos around the world. "She is not just our athlete," Maria said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "She is our daughter. And the president of the Italian Republic saw that. He saw her, he saw all of us." Her words quickly resonated across social media because, for many people, the handshake represented something far greater than sports. A handshake lasts only seconds, but what this moment symbolized could endure for years. President Sergio Mattarella's gesture was not simply a politician congratulating an athlete after a match. To countless viewers, it felt like the recognition of an entire people whose sacrifices and stories are often overlooked. The Philippines and Italy are separated by more than 11,000 kilometers. They come from different cultures, different histories, and different languages. Yet inside Rome's Foro Italico, those differences suddenly seemed to disappear. For one unforgettable evening, two nations felt emotionally connected, and the reason was Alex Eala. She had become more than a rising tennis star. She had become a bridge between worlds. The Philippine flags filling the stadium were not merely colorful decorations waving in the crowd. They carried the pride of an entire global community. The overseas Filipino workers who packed sections of the arena were not simply sports fans attending another tournament. They represented a diaspora spread across every corner of the world. Nurses working long hospital shifts in London, caregivers supporting families in Italy, engineers building futures in Dubai. Seafarers crossing oceans far from home, workers sacrificing years away from their loved ones in pursuit of better lives. For many of them, attending the Italian Open was not a casual outing or a luxury vacation. It was something deeply emotional. Some had traveled across Europe, spending hard-earned savings on flights, train rides, hotels, and tickets just for the chance to see Alex play live. Many took rare days off work, knowing they might never again experience a moment like this. They had come not because they expected her to win, but because her presence on that court was already a victory, a validation of every sacrifice they had ever made. President Mattarella seemed to understand that, and when he reportedly told Alex, "You have made Italy fall in love with the Philippines," the words carried extraordinary meaning. According to several observers, even Italian officials later reflected on the significance of that statement. Because in that moment, Alex was no longer representing only herself or her ranking on the WTA Tour. She was representing hope, pride, sacrifice, and the quiet resilience of millions of Filipinos living far from home who suddenly felt seen on one of the world's biggest sporting stages. Italy is a nation deeply proud of its culture, its history, and its people. It does not easily open its heart to outsiders. Yet Alex had managed to accomplish something extraordinary, something no diplomat, trade agreement, or international campaign could have achieved so naturally. Through her courage, her humility, and her fighting spirit, she had made the Italian people genuinely care about the Philippines. She had made them wave small Philippine flags alongside their own. She had made them learn her name and, through her, learn something about the country she represented. That is why President Sergio Mattarella's handshake felt far more meaningful than a simple post-match greeting. It was not about rankings, trophies, or statistics. It was a recognition of sacrifice, devotion, and the powerful bond between a young athlete and the millions of people who saw themselves reflected in her journey. President Mattarella did not praise Alex because she won a title. He praised her because of the heart she displayed in defeat. That understanding is the key to why the moment spread across the world so quickly. Mattarella has spent decades in public life. He has watched countless athletes compete on the biggest stages imaginable. He has stood beside world champions, Olympic heroes, and legendary figures who achieved everything their sports had to offer. But according to many observers, there was something uniquely emotional about what became known as the Alex Eala effect. Inside the Foro Italico, the Philippine flags waving across the stands were impossible to ignore. The chants of "Let's go Alex" echoed through the historic marble arena with incredible passion. Overseas Filipino workers, many of whom had spent years away from home building lives abroad, stood shoulder to shoulder, singing, cheering, and crying together as they watched one of their own compete on a global stage. For them, Alex represented far more than tennis. She represented resilience, sacrifice, and hope. The atmosphere inside the stadium reportedly left a deep impression on the Italian president himself. In later discussions about the moment, Mattarella was said to have reflected on the extraordinary energy surrounding the Filipina star. "I have been in stadiums all over the world," he reportedly told an aide. "I have heard the roar of crowds when Italy scores in the World Cup, but I have never heard a crowd quite like the one that cheered for Alex Eala." He paused, choosing his words carefully before continuing. "It was not simply noise, it was emotion. It was the sound of a global community finding pride, belonging, and connection through one young athlete." And perhaps that is why the handshake resonated so deeply around the world. It reminded people that sports are sometimes about much more than victory. Sometimes they're about making people feel seen, valued, and united even thousands of miles away from home. They were not cheering for a winner, President Sergio Mattarella reportedly said later while reflecting on the unforgettable atmosphere inside the Foro Italico. They were cheering for a fighter, and that is far more powerful. He paused for a moment, carefully choosing his words before continuing with a thought that would resonate deeply across the tennis world. "She reminds us why we love sport, not simply because of victories, but because of hope, because of the belief that anything is possible." That hope, that belief, became the true meaning behind the viral handshake that captured the hearts of millions. Although the moment itself lasted only a few seconds, its emotional impact quickly spread far beyond the tennis court and across continents. In the days that followed, discussions reportedly began within Philippine cultural circles about strengthening ties with Italy after the overwhelming warmth shown toward Alex in Rome. Diplomats and commentators alike noted how one athlete had managed to create a rare emotional bridge between two nations through nothing more than determination, humility, and sport. According to several reports and public reactions at the time, interest in Italy among Filipinos also surged dramatically after the viral moment. Travel searches for Rome increased online. Many fans openly expressed their desire to one day visit the historic Foro Italico, the place where they felt their country had been embraced on the world stage. Hotels around the tournament area reportedly noticed growing interest for the following year's Italian Open, as supporters hoped to relive the emotional atmosphere they had witnessed on television. Many viewers said they wanted to stand in the same stadium, where Philippine flags waved proudly among thousands of international fans. They wanted to feel the same emotion that had united the crowd that evening. Sports analysts later observed that Alex's influence had expanded far beyond tennis rankings or match results. Through her journey, she had given overseas Filipinos around the world a moment of visibility and pride that felt deeply personal. One diplomat reportedly summarized it perfectly by saying, "She opened doors that politics alone could never open. Through sport, through respect, and through the universal language of human connection." Alex herself appeared overwhelmed by the global reaction that followed the handshake. During interviews after returning to Manila, the young Filipina star spoke humbly about the moment that had touched millions around the world. She sat in a quiet room, a microphone clipped to her collar, and tried to find words for something that felt larger than language. "I never expected any of this," she admitted softly, still seemingly amazed that one emotional exchange with the president of Italy had become one of the defining images of the tournament. Her voice was calm, but her eyes moved frequently as if she were still trying to process what had happened. "I lost the match," she said later in the same interview, reflecting on that evening in Rome. "My ankle was hurting. I honestly thought everything was over. I had played my heart out, but it wasn't enough. And I was okay with that, or I was trying to be okay with that. I was already thinking about the next tournament, about getting healthy, about coming back stronger." She paused, her eyes beginning to glisten once again as the memory returned to her. "But then the president came over, he held my hand, and he said those words." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost a whisper. "I will never forget that moment, never." There was a long silence in the interview room. The journalist asking the questions waited. Alex wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, laughed softly at herself, and then added, "Sometimes the best things happen after you lose. That's what I learned in Rome." Her words, simple and honest, spread almost as quickly as the original Handshake footage, because they confirmed what millions had already suspected, that the moment was not staged, not rehearsed, not a carefully managed piece of political theater. It was real. An 84-year-old president, moved by the courage of a 20-year-old athlete, had broken every rule of diplomatic protocol to give her something she would carry for the rest of her life. And that, in the end, is why people cannot stop talking about it. The handshake between Sergio Mattarella and Alex Eala was never about politics or rankings or national pride alone. It was about something far rarer and more precious. A genuine human connection, captured on camera, preserved in pixels, and shared across a world that desperately needs reminders that decency still exists. The Faro Italico still stands in Rome, its marble corridors echoing with the footsteps of champions and dreamers. The Italian Open will return next year as it always does. The Philippine flags will wave again, carried by the same overseas workers who traveled thousands of miles to cheer for one of their own. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the internet, a video will keep playing. An old man holding a young woman's hand, refusing to let go, whispering words that made an entire nation cry. Because some moments are too important to be forgotten, and some handshakes, brief as they are, last forever.